let's dive right in. So let's go through our list so far of Kiss albums from worst to best. Number 20, right at the bottom, the very worst is Gene's solo album. That's not a very good album. And number 19 is Hot in the Shade, which is another very, very, very bad album. Number 18 is the art rock, progressive rock, epic music from The Elder, which is also not very good. Number 7 is there. Number 17 is Hotter Than Hell, the second studio album by Kiss. That is not a very good album either. Number 16, Rock and Roll Over, a very, very boring album. Number 15, Kiss, the self-titled album. Some classic songs on there, but not particularly good. Love Gun title track is amazing. The rest of it, though, a lot of filler. Peter Criss's solo album, which is an underappreciated gem. Highly recommend it. Please go listen to it. Number 17, Dress to Kill. Very boring album. Number 11, Animalize. Some good shred, and some pretty decent moments on it, but altogether, again, a lot of filler. Too much Gene. Number 10, Revenge. Probably their best attempt at sounding, a bit more gritty, a bit more hard rock, but still a lot to be desired. Not great songwriting on there, but probably their best produced. Probably the one that stood the test of time the best. It sounds pretty good. Number 9, Asylum. This is a bit better than Animalize. Number 8, Dynasty. They're sort of foray into disco, but it's not really a disco album. The 2 bangers for sure. A couple of other pretty good songs. Not too bad. Number 7, Lick It Up. Some bangers on that one. 3 bangers, but then goes off an absolute cliff at the end. Number 6, Destroyer. A bit of a different Kiss album. Some classic songs on there. Probably a step above for them, but ultimately probably more of the same, just with bells and whistles. Number 5, Paul's solo album. Not bad. Pretty good. Number 4, Ace's solo albums. An interesting, unique, more forward-thinking album. Not bad. Number 3, Unmasked. Not bad at all. There's some very good hooky moments on there. Some absolute bangers on there. Not too bad. Number 2, Creatures of the Night, which is a decent heavy metal album. It's pretty good. It's okay. Number 1, Crazy Nights, which is a fantastic album. Definitely solid 8 or 9 out of 10. Should have had like 5 singles off it. Only had 3. Fantastic album that I recommend to absolutely anyone. But we're not here to talk about those albums. We're here to talk about Carnival of Souls, the final sessions. So, a bit of background on this album. Whilst the band were planning their conventions, which we covered in the previous episode when we covered the Unplugged. If you haven't listened to it, go listen to it. Whilst they were planning these conventions, they also decided to plan a new album. Bob Ezrin, who produced Revenge, and before that had produced music for The Elder, and before that had produced Destroyer, was sadly not available. But according to Paul, that didn't matter because Gene had, and this is a direct quote, a bee in his bonnet. What bee is that, you ask? Well, apparently, Gene said that music was different now, and the band needed to be a bit more current. In this way, they decided to make a more darker, heavier album, a grunge album. Something a bit darker, something a bit edgier. Now, on the music is different comment, we need to be we need to be more current hypothesis. This record was recorded from November 95 to February 1996. So in true Kiss fashion, grunge had sort of peaked at this point. It's not completely dead.
Right.
Not completely dead. But it's definitely peaked. Like, Kurt Cobain is dead. Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains, Soundgarden have all released their most commercially successful albums. I mean, perhaps at this point it was in a more of a transient sort of phase where it hadn't fully fallen off yet. Uh, but I just find it funny that true to form, like true to form, they're still rocking up late to the party. Like with Music for the Elder, prog, trying to get on the prog bandwagon, probably about a decade late. And then with Dynasty, which is obviously trying to lean in towards more of a disco sound at times, was like a year
Yeah.
out. It was like a year out. And even Crazy Nights, missed the peak of very poppy hair metal because Guns N' Roses had already done Appetite. That had already come out. So there was already that sort of sound that they were trying to do on that album had already sort of come and gone. Stop being late, basically. They are tardy when it comes to trends. Do you guys agree with that? And do you think that relates into this album? Danny, what do you think?
I agree with that, and I think it's really the source of most of the shortcomings on this album.
Can you elaborate a bit more?
Well, as in, look, because it's all in the past now. So actually, I don't care how late it was, really. So I'm just talking about how it sounds in terms of its attitude and its feeling. It does not sound
It's dated.
genuine or authentic. It's a similar problem that they've had before. You can hear they're trying to tap into a formula.
Absolutely.
And that they're trying to grab what these kids are listening to. And yeah, they are late. And you can just tell that. I mean, the word cynical comes up a lot in my notes. It's a very cynical sort of, oh, is that what they're into now? Okay, let's try and bash one of those records out. I really think you can hear why they didn't want to release this. Alex?
Of the three examples you gave, Alexei, I think they're very different in that the disco one is very funny in the sense that like everybody was doing disco at a time and then they came out like a year later than most. I mean, it was really, really late for that period anyway. The hair metal stuff, like the pop hair metal, that's more of like a tragedy in the sense that that was the one that they should have been amazing at. Like that was their time, and yet it was still quite late to the trend. And then this one, kind of what Danny's saying, it's more of a sad sort of petering out. I know like grunge is kind of like a weird thing in that it was massive and then it did peter out really quickly for a few different reasons. So you can sort of forgive them that, especially like the background of this album that it does come out late. But yeah, this one's more like Danny is saying, it's a bit more just following trends, not being quite there at the scene to really capture the moment.
But I also think their age is such a big part of it.
Oh yeah,
and who they are as a band. If a new band had come out with this album at that time, I think people would have thought, oh, it's a new grunge band. They'd just say, well, grunge isn't as new as it was, but this is a new grunge band. Maybe they'd say, oh, grunge is a bit dated. But you wouldn't view it in the same way as you view this.
No, context is everything, really.
There's no young energy on this album.
Context is absolutely everything, really, in a lot of the shortcomings for this album. And Paul, in hindsight, guys, sort of agrees with you. He says, Paul says that he thought Gene was attracted to the grunge sound because it was dark and it fit with the persona Gene wanted to project. I mean, there are quite a few problems with that. I think one of the main ones is it's the wrong kind of dark for Gene. I think at least in Gene's presentation, at least in the makeup era, he was trying to be a bit more, sort of monstrous, not like, in a sort of hammer horror sort of way.
Theatrical.
Not like alienated and misanthropic. And I think the other big thing is, and I keep saying this, Gene never wrote dark songs. He doesn't write dark songs. I mean, there's a handful. I mean, like Unholy and War Machine are sort of the ones that I think of. And I mean, to call War Machine dark or even Unholy dark is sort of you know.
Not exactly Nirvana.
Not really. It's not.
What
Not
machine.
really. I mean, it's not. I mean, even calling them dark's a stretch, really. I think you know. I
Yeah.
mean, you know,
And
just
I think Paul's right. Like this is the area he's interested in. I remember when doing research for freaking Unplugged, and they do like a fan Q&A and asking Gene like what music he's into. He's saying like Pantera and Trent Reznor. Like I fully believe that he's into this kind of music, but that is different from having that muscle to be able to write and be in that place. Like you're saying, Alexei, I don't think he's not shown that yet.
No, not really. I mean, like I said, if you think that that's not true, what I said, I'd say you can see Ladies in Waiting, you can see You Tonight, you can see You, Living in Sin, Plastercaster, Nothing to Lose, basically the whole of his solo album, Firehouse, Doctor Love. Like, I could go on. He doesn't write dark songs. Early on in the process, Paul brought some songs in, and but Gene was not into it. Gene was not into it. He basically dismissed them out of hand. He told Paul, he said, "You don't know what's going on. You don't know what music is like anymore." Paul said,
"I just couldn't picture Kiss writing doom and gloom songs. What are we going to write about? That our housekeepers didn't show up today? That our limo was late?"
He's right. He is right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
He's
But-
right. It's just the way he talks. I
But
agree
this
with
is
it.
he's right. He is right. But this is in hindsight. Bear in mind, hindsight is 2020. I would bet that this is all in hindsight, and he probably never said that at the time, or at least not in those words.
Oh yeah, probably not.
Yeah. No, I don't think so. Paul also said
That it was ridiculous for me to write gloomy songs. And just as ridiculous for Gene to do it too. It ain't that dark in Beverly Hills.
Paul was also skeptical of what the grunge bands would do on their second album. Paul said,
There were a lot of great first albums, but what would they do once they were Platinum X? Instead of kids living in roach-infested garages. I mean, if they were so miserable, once they had money, they could all go see shrinks.
fucking hell. I mean, yeah, I'm sure Kurt Cobain would agree with that. Sure, he would agree with that. You know, that I mean, that's a dumb thing to say. I mean, you can still have money and have a lot of stuff in your past, or you know, to write about. It's not necessarily social commentary grunge. It doesn't necessarily have to be about how you feel in the here and now. Most, if not all, of the seminal grunge albums were the second albums of those bands. Nirvana, Nevermind, second album. Second, third, or fourth. You know, Alice in Chains, Dirt, second album. Soundgarden, Super Unknown was their fourth album. I'm not just talking about. I'm talking commercially as well. I'm talking in Paul's terms, right? Of what constitutes successful. Like, these are their most commercially and for the most part critically most successful albums. I think, and this will factor into what Danny's saying about the insincerity and the disingenuousness and the cynicalness of this album, is I just think Paul was not paying attention to grunge and probably resented it, and that's why he formulated that opinion. Danny, what do you think?
Yeah, I've not thought about it that way, Alex, specifically as that. And I think you are right. I will say, at the age he was at that time, he doesn't need to be paying attention to grunge in the slightest. Really, let's be honest, he was getting older already at that, but for a rock star, getting old. And why should he pay attention to grunge?
Right.
He's in Kiss. I'm sort of with him overall. I see your
agree.
point about he probably is very cynical and resentful towards grunge. So I think it... The original sin here is Gene for planting this seed and being like, we need to make this sort of music.
Absolutely.
And I think that something that we've complimented Paul for in the past, which is that sort of work ethic. That kind of he threw himself at Elder and it didn't go well, but you get the feeling like he made himself believe in it and he made himself think this is a brilliant album. I think that work ethic has run into the cynicism that you just described, or even the resent perhaps in him that you just described. I think those two are at odds on this album. Alex?
Yeah, I don't have much to add on it. We know Gene was big into this idea. I wonder if there was any push from Eric and Bruce as well.
I can get onto Bruce.
I
can get onto Bruce in a bit. Bruce actually has quite a lot to say about this. Eric, though, I don't think Eric really has a say at this point. He's only an album in.
But they were younger and maybe they were more wanting
hip.
to chase that sound. I don't know. That's just an assumption. But yeah, maybe Paul's a bit cynical. Cynical's not the right word. Bit pissed about it because it was maybe 3 against 1. In this situation.
Perhaps. But in any case, Gene felt very strongly about the project, and Paul said he went along with it because he might be proven wrong.
The album could come out and people might say it's a work of genius, but I seriously doubted it. After all, it was us impersonating other bands, which made no sense. Kiss celebrated life. We sung about how great life was and about self-empowerment.
I mean,
I agree with him in that they celebrate life, in a joy,
I know what you're saying, Alexei, because you're thinking of songs like, I don't know, A Million
No.
to One. And you're also thinking about how they are as people.
I agree. No, I agree in total. They write anthemic songs, Rock and Roll All Night, Shout It Out Loud, stuff about self-empowerment. You know what I mean? Tomorrow Tonight, shit like that. Like, I get that. It's kind of like, you know what you were saying about Elder, about how he kind of had a very similar response to Elder, like about his feelings about them making it and stuff like that. And you said, had Elder been a success, we would not be hearing any of this. And I think it's pretty much the same thing.
Sure. I agree with that.
Thing. I totally agree. I think Kiss is, God gave rock and roll to you, all that stuff. Kiss functions better when they're writing anthemic songs. Their best album is full of anthemic songs. Turn on the Night, Crazy Crazy Nights, Reason to Live, all that stuff. Like, that is where they're most strong. In fact, I was actually going to get on to the Million to One thing, which is, it's not like they haven't written dark songs in the past, or he hasn't written dark songs in the past, but it's not misanthropic dark music. It's not alienation.
It's not
alienation, is it? It's not like it's not gloomy. It's not like life is terrible and I want to kill myself. It's more like, this is a bad thing that happened to me and you can maybe relate to it. It's usually about breakups and stuff like that.
Bitter.
It's more about.
Well, I agree with that, Alexei. If your point is just Paul lies about this sort of stuff, then I agree with you.
Basically.
Because he does. He is so obsessed with writing history in his favor. I see him do it time and time again in interviews. That's really what he's focused on. So I think, he'll write it so that he was always right. All along.
100%. Sorry, I'm eating a mini roll. Hang on. Oh, it's so good.
That's all right. But he's right. He is right, and it is just ridiculous that Kiss.
It's a ridiculous notion.
And that they went for this sound. It's
a ridiculous notion. It's a ridiculous notion.
Yeah.
In fact, I was going to get on to what you think about the making of grunge album. We'll go into more details about that later. But no, you're right. It is completely ridiculous. Anyway, Paul said he tuned down his guitar but struggled to write songs he had no real connection with.
Meanwhile, Gene reveled in the idea of trying to out Metallica. There was already a great Metallica, and we sure as hell weren't gonna beat them.
Metallica on a grunge album, on a grunge band.
That was already
not a grunge band though. It doesn't sound like Metallica.
I didn't even think
They're
about
not a grunge band.
It's not even.
It's trying to sound like Ride the Lightning, is it? like anyway.
To be fair, did Gene say the word grunge in any of these quotes? Was he just saying, quote, darker music? Is that all it is? Are we putting this grunge thing
No,
in?
he said things like, I want to sound like what's on the radio. So I want to sound like, he said, like, I want to sound like that bald guy on the radio, is what he used to say. And he was referring to Billy Corgan of the Smashing Pumpkins.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
We were at our best.
sorry.
At our best, we were a great kiss, and that fact seemed lost. As we tried to hop on a train we could never pull, we were lucky to be the caboose.
It's a weird analogy, that. Do you not think?
Yeah.
You don't drag a train. You don't pull a train. You, like, go on a train. It made sense at the beginning. It was like,
We were hopping on a train.
I was like, all right, yeah, that makes sense. And then it just sort of goes off a cliff at the end. So, odd analogy.
Odd man.
Odd man. Anyway, Paul did, however, find some connection when he wrote the song "I Will Be There" about his son, Evan. It's weird that he shoehorned a subject he cared quite a lot about into a genre that he obviously doesn't like. I think that's quite odd.
But to be fair, that song isn't even a little bit grunge.
It's a bit. It's a bit. I kind of get.
It's slightly
It's a
darker
bit-
in
It's a bit darker.
Alright.
sonically, isn't it?
Okay. Yeah, it is.
On Paul's son being born, because there's not a lot of information out there really about this album, so I thought I'd just put any old shit that I could find in. Paul says that he remembered the last sonogram before his son was born. He said when the doctor did a close-up of the baby's face, the head turned and faced Paul. He said that he turned and faced him as if on cue. Do you want to know what Paul said about that?
What are you doing?
What are you doing?
He said,
Oh my god, that's my face!
the idea.
Well,
Looking at the sonogram.
All right.
Well, I mean, if I saw, like, I don't know, if I saw a baby turn around and had Paul Stanley's weird fucking face staring at me, I'd probably do the same thing. So, Paul, again, not happy. He has to write songs about how miserable everything is, and thought they would not do it well. So, ultimately, I mean, we've sort of gone over this. What do you think of Kiss doing a grunge album? I mean, don't get me wrong. I get that grunge is sort of a stupid term, right? It's sort of a term that journalists made up to describe sort of groups of bands that didn't really sound that much alike, really. Like, I don't really think Soundgarden sounds like Nirvana. I don't really think that Alice in Chains sound like Mudhoney. I don't really think that Pearl Jam sound like Soundgarden. Like, do you know what I mean? But in terms of making, you know, thematically, there are a lot that links those bands together. You know, songs about alienation, songs about, you know, how miserable everything is. So what do you think of Kiss doing an album like this? And don't get me wrong, they were not the first ones that were attempting to do this. There's a whole slew of bands that were big in the 80s that attempted to do this, you know, for better and worse. You know, Poison tried to do it, Motley Crue did it with their their self-titled album, Skid Row did it with Subhuman Race, Queensryche did it with their fifth album.
Is it better in any case, Alexei?
Yes. Actually, there was one I was gonna bring up, and it sort of makes sense. Depeche Mode made an album called Songs of Faith and Devotion, and that's a very, very good album. But what they did, which is what I don't think Kiss does on here, but I don't think it would have made sense for Kiss to do it on here, is that they blended their sound already with just kind of more natural instrumentation, a bit less electronic, and just kind of made the music darker. But their music was already quite dark to begin with. So if you just make it a bit more kind of natural sounding and just a bit sort of darker, a bit more bleak, it sort of makes sense. But to them, it wasn't a huge departure for them to make an album like that. It's sort of, there was a through line there that made sense. And I would also say that Skid Row's album, Subhuman Race, which is a bit more kind of groove metal-y and a bit more alternative, is not as bad as you'd think it was going to be. But for the most part, you are right. It basically never worked. It didn't, like, I was watching a documentary series called Metal Evolution, and they had and it was about like different genres of metal and how they sort of progressed in the history of them. And they did grunge. Sorry, not grunge. They did hair metal, and of course, you know, with any sort of music history documentary, it comes to the point where it's like, oh, Nirvana came and everything changed, sort of thing. You know, that sort of presentation of music history. Yeah. And you know, they sort of play the chorus of Smells Like Teen Spirit and put the video on and stuff like that. And they have all these hair metal artists talking about like how it was like a joke for us to play this music. Like, they had the drummer of Poison who gave a really honest answer. He was like, look, I can't write songs about how much I hate my life. I don't hate my life. And he's saying, as like an artist, it would be really, really wrong of me to put my name on something like that, because that's not how I think. That's not how I feel. That's not my opinion on things. It would just be completely disingenuous. And, you know, for the most part, you know, Kiss, I guess, included, is completely disingenuous, and ultimately that's why I think it's the biggest failure of this album. Sorry, went on a tangent there, but Danny, ultimately, what do you think about Kiss doing a grunge album? Just as an idea, not the product that we get here, but just as an idea. I know you've hinted at it before, but what do you think?
Okay, yeah, look, I'm always open. I was open to Elder. I'm open to them doing disco. I tried to come at it positively. I should point out, I know you like a lot of those. You really like a lot of those early grunge bands, Alexei. I either don't know them that well or haven't liked what I've heard that much. I like a bit of Nirvana, but even them I don't know that well. So I don't come at it very protectively. I'm not like, that's not real grunge at all. So I tried to be open-minded, but I think my original point stands that just narratively, it makes absolutely no sense, and we'll get on to...
I just wanted to ask a question quickly. Do you think that them making a grunge album is more or less ridiculous on paper than them making a prog album? Because I actually think that them making a prog album, to me, makes more sense than a grunge album.
Yeah, I agree. It makes much more sense them trying a quote prog album than a grunge album. Yeah, on the the basic understanding of those genres, Kiss is so far away from grunge.
To do prog, like prog is a lot of theatrics. I know there's a lot more to it than that, but there's a lot. The theatric sides of it lends itself very nicely to Kiss and how they were presenting themselves back in the 70s. And 80s.
Yeah, and look,
while grunge has less connections, should we say, to that. I'll answer the question as well. I have no issue with bands changing up their styles or trying something different. But usually, it has to somewhat make sense, like we're saying, or I don't know, to sort of naturally come about, like, when Red Hot Chili Peppers changed their sound quite a bit. I have no issues with that. When Radiohead change up their sound, it's fine. But it does need to come from a sort of more natural place. And as we've already discussed, that it just doesn't fit Kiss.
Can I add?
At all. And I'd say, just to say, like, I don't think grunge is just writing about how shit your life is.
No, not at all.
Like, of course, it comes from a more depressing place, like maybe lyrically, but it's also just a sort of where you're writing music and who you're appealing to and where the music is played, sort of thing. And to go for Kiss to go from stadium anthems, and I really mean it, like stadiums, to grunge, which I associate with like backyard concerts and garages, sort of thing. Yeah, it makes no sense, as we've all said.
Yeah, it's a bad idea.
Just to go off what you just said, Alex, like, they admitted it. About when you're talking about, like, the artist's intention is very important and how they were inspired to make a certain music. Gene admits it. He straight up said, "This is not how music is made." Or what did he say? "This is not how music sounds anymore. You don't know how music sounds anymore."
Yeah.
That is such, and it's what they've done a million times before. That's sort of, they do not write songs how we all believe people should write songs, which is, that it's inspired, that it comes from an artistic place or a point of self-expression. With them, it's what's in, we need to cash in on it. And again, they admit it. You're allowed to say that because they've told us as much. So it is that's what's bad about it, the grunge things, because they are older now, and grunge was about, a group of young people coming along and changing things up. And that's why it's a really bad look for this very corporate band to try and jump on that.
Incredibly corporate band. Yeah, I think you made a good point, Alex, when you were saying that, or at least when you were comparing, sort of, at least maybe the points of their career and stuff like that. Whereas, like, when Kiss were doing prog, or attempting to do prog or art rock or something like that, like Alice Cooper's early albums were like art and prog rock sort of thing, or at least attempting to be more psychedelic, more Zappa infused, whatever. So, it's not that much of a departure, really, to see Kiss doing something, a bit more sort of arty. And also, when they did Elder, they were, and this is going off what Danny said, like, about them being older at this point when they're doing Carnival of Souls, which is when they did Elder, it was kind of towards the front, more towards, like, the front end of their career. So it kind of made, it was more, they had more license to kind of switch things up and, like, change things about and stuff like this. Like, they like what Danny said, they don't really need to do this. Like, band helping, like, doing something that's obviously so aimed at young people and made by young people. Anyway, Bruce.
Can I just ask one thing? A
go
hypothetical that sort of come to my head. So we're all saying like, to make this kind of music, it needs to come from a more natural place, sort of thing. Big hypothetical. If, say, the reunion happened a little bit earlier, so Peter Criss and Ace Frehley joined the band again, and they come in and they're like, well, Ace goes on about his addictions, and Peter all the troubles he had over the past decade and a bit. Do you think sort of stories like that being added to the band's narrative would give them more license to try something like this? Am I making sense for this?
Yeah, but also not enough. I don't think it'd be enough.
I
know we were pushing back earlier, and I agree with Alexei kind of saying, you can be successful and still have depressing things to write about. But there is a point to be made there. As an audience, you can't help but it's very hard to, separate the art from the artist. And if you know someone is very rich, it's hard to drop that bias.
Basically, Kiss are fooling nobody with this. Absolutely nobody. It's so disingenuous. Like, the whole point is like, yeah, you can sing about things, be successful and sing about, things that upset you and stuff like that. But this isn't it. This isn't it. It's like what Danny was saying about the writing. This might have been the point I was going to bring up before, but it's the same with Elder. This is the cart before the horse. This is them saying, "Oh, we're going to make this kind of music. Here you go." With having no real interest in it. Oh yeah, I think I remember what the other point is I was going to make. Yeah, it was that they're trying to appeal to younger people at this point. right? So people that listen to Alice in Chains, people that are listening to Soundgarden and stuff like that, because proper Kiss fans or people that grew up with Kiss aren't really going to buy this, other than the fact it has got Kiss written on it. Do you know what I mean? So who the fuck, right? Who does listen after having listened to this album? Who does like Alice in Chains and does like Nirvana and does like Pearl Jam and stuff like that, or likes the Melvins or whatever, is going to turn around and go like, "Oh, this is good," you know, in comparison to that band, to those bands. Like, did he really think that people are going to go like, "Oh, you know, I like." Again, it's very paint by numbers. It's very like, "Oh, just make something that sounds like that," you know.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. Anyway, Bruce Kulick, their lead guitar player, had 8 co-writes on this album. Much like Vinny on Lick It Up or Ace on Unmasked. This record is very much a three-way split between Paul, Gene, and Bruce. Bruce said, and I've got a lot of stuff Bruce said here, which is nice for a change. Bruce said it was a tragedy that Revenge didn't go platinum. This is like his take on like why they made the album, you know, as opposed to Paul's, which I think might be a bit more honest. He said that Revenge didn't go platinum, and that was a tragedy. So because of that commercial disappointment, they decided to make a darker album. He agrees that Gene was attracted to the darker sound, but that Gene hated the flannel shirts. He said he didn't like how grunge musicians look like they'd worked at a gas station, which I can believe. But it seemed that Bruce, because of the directive, took on a lot of the bulk of the work. So because they decided to make this, to change their sound and sort of try to make this sort of a record, he took on a lot of the work in order to make that happen. He said he listened to a lot of Alice in Chains, which does not surprise me. He thought a lot of their riffs were cool and thought it could be an interesting look for Kiss to make a sort of a darker, more sort of meaner sort of Kiss. Bruce also said that Paul didn't care for it, as we've covered, but when it came to writing, he would come up with something like Master and Slave and would really, really dial in and work very hard. A bit like what Danny said about Elder when he's sort of throwing himself at it, even though he doesn't fully believe in it. Bruce sort of supports that. Bruce said he locked himself in a room with a drum machine and would constantly write riffs and tried to warm Paul up to the idea. So Bruce is very invested. He said it worked, and Paul ultimately did think it was a cool idea and was on board with it. Overall, Bruce feels that he wished the album had been mixed a bit better and that ultimately it got screwed. I think on the mixing, and we'll get to the mix in a bit, but I think on the mixing, because they weren't planning on releasing it, when they did finally decide to release it, they just did a rush job of it and put it out.
Yeah.
He said Paul and Gene, whilst they were recording the album, were already negotiating a reunion. During recording, Paul and Gene would disappear for these long telephone conversations where they were negotiating the reunion behind Bruce and Eric's back. And this is during recording. This is like during when they are recording this album. That is rough. Fucking hell. That's horrible, man.
That's so Kiss. That is
Horrible.
so Kiss, man.
Also, in the biography, in the autobiographies as well, they're constantly like,
We never even thought about bringing Ace and Peter back. Bruce had earned his place.
yeah, but you did bring them back. And clearly, in a really underhanded way. Sadly for Bruce, the album was shelved. But Paul did tell Bruce that the album would come out eventually. However, Bruce says it only came out because the record company had paid a lot of money for it to be recorded. Which makes perfect sense to me, I think.
And I heard, because it was getting bootlegged a lot anyway, they were like,
It was,
shit,
yeah.
we'll just release it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, with the idea that there's like starving families in the world and millions and millions of dollars went down the toilet for Kiss to produce a grunge album which never came out is, indicative of quite a cruel world that we live in. So I'm glad it got put out for that reason. It was released in 1997 during the reunion tour. With Ace and Peter, and it's sort of seen this album as a bit of a footnote. There was a single released, Jungle, which is 6 minutes and 50 seconds, which is an odd choice, but we can get to that when we get to that track. Jungle, the single, got to number 8 on the mainstream rock charts, which is pretty good considering. Considering grunge is dead, and Kiss are not selling this album at all. They are not trying to sell it. They're not trying to push for it. They're just like reunion, buy tickets, whatever. That's pretty fucking good. The album itself got to number 27, which again is pretty good. Again, grunge is dead. This is not being pushed. This is not being promoted. And 27 is not bad. Overall, this album has had quite mixed reviews. Bruce has said people are equally vocal about it being their favourite Kiss CD or thinking it's the worst thing ever. So before we do the cover, before we move on to the cover, and yes, we are going to do the cover, as little to talk about it as there is, there is some footage of the band recording this album, which is a nice little insight. Have you watched the footage? What do you think, Alex? What do you think?
Yes.
Yeah, it's it doesn't match the music that comes out. It seems like a very sort of slightly, at least the clips I saw, quite playful recording sessions.
Can I just say something on that? Can I just say something on that?
Go on.
None of them look like grunge musicians. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, yeah, they don't look like grunge musicians. And the kids are about. I'm assuming it's Paul's kid as well as a bunch of others, which we hear on the album, I guess.
That's Gene's kid.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, the one that's like, stop or I'll shoot, and he's got a fake gun. That's Gene's kid.
Yeah. Oh, in fairness, I should have known from how the freaking kid acts.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what to make of it. I'd say like it didn't fit the album whatsoever, and it's quite nice to get some clips of their recording because have we seen any from any of their previous albums?
No, not really.
I wonder what led to them doing this.
Danny, what do you think, buddy?
Well, mate, I've said before that I've always wanted to be a fly on the wall during just them talking to each other, so I do appreciate that it exists. However, I don't think there was actually that much of interest in it. The only thing that piqued my interest was the bit when Gene's, like, doing this bit of banter with Paul, I guess, and he's kind of saying, like, that time that you... That time that you just hated everyone, and the prick tour, and you didn't care about the fans, and maybe I'm misreading it, but Paul looks visibly uncomfortable that he's making this joke on camera. Because that is literally, like, he's literally just destroying Paul's brand there. Paul is always talking about how the fans come first and he does everything for the fans, and Gene is just shitting all over that.
Like,
it doesn't come across like the two of them have very much chemistry socially at all. So, yeah, that bit was a bit... Felt a bit bad for Paul there.
Paul's
Alexei,
outfit's pretty good, though, isn't it? Paul's outfit's pretty good.
Well,
he's got sort of a tucked-in white shirt with all the buttons undone and a nice purple bandana. Looks very cool.
I noticed the bandana.
There's a couple of things I picked up on. Bruce recording his solo. Bruce fucking canes. I don't think that solo that take is on this album. It's a fucking good solo though. I was like, shit, man. He's got the whammy pedal going. There's whammy pedal on this album, but I don't think they used that solo because it was too shreddy. But he's like, really fucking good solo. Like I said, none of them really look like a grunge band. You know, like the purple fucking bandanas and stuff like that. Particularly Gene, he really doesn't. There is something though. I thought was quite interesting. There's a bit where Gene and Paula are around the mic, and Gene's got his headphones on, and he's talking to whoever's in the control room. I presume the producer. And he's like, you know, you're looking left to right. You never know what the guy's doing. You never know what the guy's doing. You know, like that. Do you remember that? Do you remember that part?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's sort of pointing off camera. So I was watching that, and I said, I wonder what the guy's doing. You know, whoever he's referring to, sort of off camera, whatever. I was like, I wonder what the guy's doing, like that. I didn't think anything of it, and then I paused, and my son, who overheard me say that, said, "Perhaps there's a man in the room in the corner shearing sheep." And I was like, maybe.
That's it.
That would
That's
distract
it.
me as well. They were trying to do a vocal take.
What you doing?
You never know what the guy's doing.
I thought that
You
was
never
a
know what the guy's
simple-
doing over there. Like,
You know, the old studio. The thing that, like, you're not, as an audio engineer, on the other side, like, if you're at the mixing desk and they're in the recording room, you should never talk to anyone after a take without the talkback mic on. Because it's going to destroy the confidence of any performer. So you should always turn on the talkback mic, because otherwise they're going to think you're saying it's a shit take.
I see. So is that what he was doing? So it was like they were sort of talking.
little bit
He was
of-
like, so he was like, so he was sort of like talking, and then was like, oh yeah, I'd rather you just tell me directly what you're saying on the mic. That makes sense.
Well, that's what I thought, but
makes
now I think it's probably more likely it's someone shearing a sheep in the corner.
Yeah, I mean, you didn't consider that, though, did you? That maybe there's a
No, I
guy in the corner shearing sheep. It's going into summer. The sheep are going to be too warm. They need to have their coats sheared.
Yeah.
It
And
would
he's like telling
distract
them
me
to
as well.
stop, but they're like, well, it's coming into summer. It's coming. We need to shear the sheep.
Leave them alone! They'll roast!
It's Paul.
Yeah, it's Paul shearing sheep.
Shearing the sheep, shearing the sheep.
Anyway, there's also, by the way, I don't know if you watch this as well, but there is some footage, there's a clip on YouTube of Bruce playing a medley of
Yeah, I
this
saw that.
material on the Kiss Cruise, because of course that's a thing. Of course that's a thing that exists, the Kiss Cruise. And I think, not to give too much away, I think the songs sound better and come alive more on this clip, on this footage. Even though the quality of the footage is not very good, I think they work better than they do on this album. And I think mostly it's because of the singers. I think the singers do a better job with them.
Yeah. The Gene stand-in I thought was very good in terms of
He was.
bringing more out of the Gene songs.
I thought he was
Yeah,
very
but
good.
I'm going to be honest. I thought it was better than Paul and Gene. The
No,
singing.
I
I'm gonna
agree.
be honest.
I agree.
I put this in my conclusion. That performance, I think, both of the vocalists on that Bruce Kulick thing do a better vocal job than the two members
Completely
of Kiss on this
agree.
album.
I completely agree. I actually don't want to give too much away, but I actually think that this is one of Paul's worst outings as a singer, this album. But we'll go on to that in a bit. I also gave Bruce Kulick's channel I gave it a subscribe. I subscribed to it. I'm probably never going to watch any of his videos, but I thought, having known what I know, he seems like a nice man and could do with the boost. So thank you, Bruce.
And if
He's
he
a
ever wants to
guitarist
come on
as
the
well.
podcast, would love to have him.
Bruce, if you ever want to come on this podcast, mate, for an interview, please get in touch. We'd happily have you. We'll accommodate you. I've got mini rolls.
We're not going to reach
and
out.
You can tell me whether there was actually a man shearing sheep that was putting Gene off, or maybe he just he needed the producer to get on the control mic better. You have the answers to these questions. Please get in touch. The cover, the album cover. Alex, I know there's not much to say. But Alex, what do you think of this cover?
We were talking earlier about, how sort of fake and trend chasing all this is. And yes, there is an element of that to the music, but none of it is as bad as this cover. This cover, I think, is the worst of the lot in terms of them presenting themselves in this way is, I think, really insulting. I think the music, experiment with the music and try, hey, maybe they really want to do it. But to present from the Kiss that's been around for 20 plus years now, and all the things they do and all the things they say they pride themselves on, to do this cover where it's just, sort of in these shabby clothing and just like, oh, this is us, and we're just rocking out and showing us our authentic glum selves or whatever. Whatever they're trying to get across here. For them to present themselves in this way, in that room with those, I know they're not posing in the sense like we think about it, but like, it is posing, isn't it? Like, look at the way that Gene's holding the guitar.
They're posing.
Yeah, of course it's posed.
It is
it
the
is
worst
posed,
part of this whole album.
Well, is it not
you
fair?
know what I mean?
Is it not fair to say though that this was probably not the intended cover for the actual release? Had this been a proper album,
that's probably true. But it's still the cover. We got to critique it.
It is still the cover.
But you could
and it is still a project that they put out. But I would argue that the fact that they called it Carnival of Souls, the final sessions, they are trying to present it as more of a bootleg, more of a rarity rather than a actual studio album. I agree. It's a very shit. It's a very shit cover. I agree with that. And I think even if you were going to do a bootleg, you could still do it well. You could still do a bootleg and still do it, or a rarity, and still put some effort into the cover. I do agree with that. Sorry, carry on.
However, Alexei, you can still do that, and like I understand that could be the case, but you can still do something like with the unplugged sessions. You can add some effects, some you can do some digital work or make it so their faces are not on it or presented this way. There's ways that you can create an album cover without them being used because they probably weren't together at that point, and still, I don't know, present a different kind of album. But I think this cover is the most insulting part of this whole thing, this whole project, really.
Yeah, I think this is obviously supposed to go in the gatefold or in the liner notes if it had been an actual release. I do agree, though, if it is going to be a rarity or something like that, they could have put a bit more effort into the cover. There are rarities with great covers, and unreleased albums that sort of, B-sides and whatever. Like, look at another grunge band that do a rarities B-sides album, Incesticide by Nirvana. It's got a great cover. Doesn't take much, and they've got a lot of money to be able to pull that off. I mean, because again, I would sort of argue similar to you, Alex, that they could have just done something a bit more polished than this. Like, it's very flat. It's not really candid like you'd think they were trying to go for, because they've clearly been posed. They've obviously been posed. Like, the shadows are quite clumsy.
Look at Paul's, like,
the leg,
how he's standing.
The leg. Bruce looks a bit more candid. Bruce looks a bit more like he's just turned around and gone, "Oh, hello," and then had the picture taken. Like, but he's kind of the only one. The shadows are clumsy and don't really add a lot of depth. I think the fact that the image is accompanied by that title, Carnival of Souls, which is obviously trying to come across as quite dark, it's just juxtaposes in a very confusing way. I think they should have just called it The Final Sessions. and made it like as opposed to Carnival of Souls, because that's it's meant to be this like dark, evil sounding title, but it's just been presented with this sort of very sort of shabby, shabby image. It's confusing. I don't think this was promoted much either, so it's amazing to me that just off the cover that it sold that well, because again, I don't think people were trying to promote it, so the fact that it sold as well as it did with this as a cover is amazing for me. I think it just must have relied on people seeing the Kiss logo and going, oh yeah, check that out, and not knowing much about the music that was inside. The font is incredibly cheap looking and not symmetrical. They struggle with symmetry on their covers. They really do struggle with symmetry, and this is a good example. The whole title needs to be shifted a bit to the left.
Oh, yeah.
It all needs to be
Yeah.
shifted a bit
See
to
it
the
now.
left. The S in Soul is closer to the edge of the frame than the C in Carnival, and it's quite frustrating to look at. I like the open door at the far end of the room. I think it looks pretty ominous. They should have all had gotten They should have got Vinnie Vincent to stick his head out of that door. I think it would have looked great. Or the four of them, should have all crammed in at the gap, sort of peeking their heads out from behind the door. I think that would have looked great. So no, this is not a good cover. In many ways, I guess it is their worst one, but I don't think necessarily it's fair to call it that. Danny, what do you think?
Is it possible that this was the cover used for the bootleg that was circulating, and they just copied it as a sort of oh that's what people are sharing, and so we're just going to use the cover that they used?
I don't know, man. You
know
go
what I
into
mean?
you go into your thoughts, and I'll give it a little bit. I'll give it a Google. You go into your thoughts.
I don't have much to say. I just agree that it's really shit, and I just want to bring attention to Paul and how out of place he looks on this cover. He looks so out of place.
Yes.
It's
And
not
I was
on
just
the
thinking
brand,
now,
is it?
just as you guys were talking, you cannot play grunge on that guitar. I don't want to gatekeep, but that is not a grunge guitar right there. That is, yeah. So, no, I don't have anything to say about this front cover. There they are. Yeah.
Can't get a read on whether this was. Apparently, there is another cover that's circulated, which people believe was meant to be the actual cover, and it's like this gimp mask that's on fire, basically, which also does not look very good either. Let's get in to track by track. The first track we open with a Gene song, which is Hate. At first, when it kicked in, I was like, whoa, crazy intro there. Shit's going to pop off. There's some dive bombs. And then the riff comes in, and I was sort of digging the riff, to be honest with you. I was enjoying the riff. It's very Alice in Chains. It's also very Soundgarden, and I like that sort of stuff. In general, and I know we were talking about their, on paper, their attempts to sound like grungy is more ridiculous than their attempts to sound like it's more ridiculous for them to sound proggy or even like disco or whatever. However, in general, in terms of their attempts to replicate a sound, I think instrumentally, this is probably their most successful album at doing that, as in trying to replicate instrumentals of that genre. There are clear attempts to straight up rip off Alice in Chains. Obviously, when they say, "Oh, we were inspired by this sort of like by a grunge sound," it's mostly Alice in Chains. Like, there's no Nirvana on this album. There's no Melvins. There's no Pearl Jam. There's no Mudhoney. There's no Green River. There's no Mother Love Bone. It's pretty absent. Particularly the harmonies. The harmonies are very Alice in Chains. Particularly, there's one line where it says like "go straight through the same door," which is very, very, very Alice in Chains, Lane Staley, Jerry Control harmony. I think this is one of their worst sounding snares, but I don't know if that's just because the mix was clearly rushed. I think their snare on this whole album sounds tinny and incredibly quiet. However, musically, bar that, I was pretty digging it. I was digging it. This, I think, I think Bruce obviously knuckled down and did a good job at approximating the sound. Structurally, though, it's completely all over the place, really. I have no idea what section is kind of meant to be the chorus. It's not very... it kind of all sounds like bridge. Every section sounds like a bridge, you know. But if the vibe is meant to be chaotic, then I don't necessarily think it's been pulled off that badly. The biggest problem with this and for the rest of the album are just, of course, the vocals. Like, Gene, man, it's much like Music for the Elder. This is just so lacking in sincerity that you can't really get a purchase on it. You just get this pervasive feeling of like, just don't be silly. Don't be silly. This doesn't really sound good. You trying to do this just doesn't really just doesn't really sound good or genuine. It's just no one's buying it. No one's buying it. It doesn't sound alienated. It's not relatable, and that ultimately makes the track a failure because, you know, what you're left with is a feeling of, oh well, I could just go listen to Alice in Chains, couldn't I? Really? And it would be better than this. If I was in the mood for something like this, I could just go listen to Alice in Chains or Stone Temple Pilots or you know, Screaming Trees or something. Like, it's a great solo from Bruce. He shows how diverse he is as a guitarist. I think that his style on this is a lot more noisy, which is nice. It's nice to hear from him. And he uses a whammy pedal to great effect on this. I think it is nice. However, and this is criticism that I'll come later, this sort of solo style he does a lot of on this album, and you sort of lose patience with it, I think, relatively quickly. This song doesn't work, but for kind of, in my opinion, a unique reason, which is why a lot of the songs on this album don't work, where instrumentally, I think they sound fine for the most part. Some of them don't, but for the most part, most of them sound, I think, fine. It's the vocals and the lyrics that really ultimately make them a failure, because it's a round peg in a square hole, basically. Danny, what are your thoughts, mate? On hate!
I'm wondering if we're going to disagree on the placement of this in the list. I was laughing at the noisy guitar intro.
Right,
and then it comes in and I'm just laughing because it's like the title of the song with this riff. I was thinking, what the fuck is this shit? And then he's singing it instantly. He's trying to go for this, I don't know which one, like Chris Cornell, like that kind of.
Nah, it doesn't sound.
Everything's
just
bending.
Sounds like him.
Not quite.
Yeah, it just sounds like
Chris
him.
Cornell.
I don't think it's Chris Cornell. He just
Maybe
sounds
Eddie
like
Vedder.
him.
No, but there's that way of that kind of grungy. I mean, that's how a lot of those guys sing.
Yeah.
And he's trying to do that sound, and of course it's Gene. He can't pull it off at all.
No, so it's a bad look.
Yeah, and I did just start to think, man, I think this is maybe the difference between me and you, Alexei, because I sort of agree with you about the sort of the techniques on display are quite apt, but I was just thinking, I don't like this sort of music. I was just thinking, I guess I don't like grunge that much, if this is even what you'd call that. Anyway, I don't like this sound very much, and so I was thinking, I don't think I'm gonna like this album very much, because this song or this type of music, to me, it needs noticeable guitar works. It needs good vocals, or it needs good lyrics, or it needs a really slamming groove, and it doesn't have any of that. It's ticking some boxes to sort of be to be a sound, but it's not working for me at all. Even the solo I thought was good, but the pedal and the accompaniment, the fact that it's just one note, that doesn't work for me at all. And as I've said before, I think a solo is only as good as its rhythm section. I did like it a bit more on the second listen. I was hearing more of the drum work, and I was thinking, oh, that is quite good. I thought, oh, the riffing is fine. The only other thing I'd say is Gene's gone He did it on the last album. He's gone so Richard Dawkins in the 90s. He just loves writing about, I don't need your religion. All that. So, that's good, Gene. So, actually, pretty negative from me. Pretty negative. What do you think, Alex?
Sorry, can I just hop on something that you mentioned there?
Yeah.
The fact that you and me don't necessarily agree on the instrumental, I actually don't think matters, because I think that even if the instrumental were better even than I think it is, it still wouldn't save it, because I just think the look and the vibe and the performance is so round peg in a square hole that it can't be saved.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Like, I don't think this is good at all. Do you know?
No, you're right. No, what it is probably, Alexis, you're better suited to point out where it's good than I am, right?
Yeah,
you're more familiar with this type of music. Yeah.
Yeah, I think in
what
a
it's
lot of
pulling
ways,
off.
in a lot of ways, we probably actually think that it's, like, you know, like we probably have. I still have a very negative feeling towards it, because I just think it's that disingenuous and insincere that it actually doesn't really matter how good the instrumental is. Do you know what I mean? It'd be like,
yeah.
It would be like if you got like an if you got an Alice in Chains instrumental, like a song I really like, but if you got like, I don't know, fucking Lil Wayne
Gene
to sing it
on it
or something like that, or Gene, Jimmy Fine, Lil Wayne, Gene, I'm fucking, you know what I mean, like Barry Manilow or something like that, I'd just be like, well, this clearly isn't working, is it? This is silly. This is ridiculous. Do you know what I mean?
Agree.
It really, you're only as strong as your weakest part. You know, Alex, what do you think, mate?
Right, yeah.
I agree a lot with you, Alexei, in terms of like the instrumentation and the effort put into recreating the sound.
Bruce did a good job. Bruce, I think, did a good job.
Yeah, they're clearly really trying. And like on first listen, I thought this is a big departure. Just the sounds and like the instrumentation, and I'm not quite sure on the techniques used, but like some of the production techniques to sort of achieve those sounds a little bit more. So well done on that part, because you know it seems like they were going off the cover and what we know, like they were really trying to nail that. But in terms of the song itself, Hate, and like how it's written, it feels very similar to me on stuff coming off Revenge, in that they're trying to go for a heavier sound, and the song structure just goes all over the place. Like you were saying, Alexei, and this is for quite a lot of songs on this album, the verses and bridges and choruses are all messy, and you're not quite sure what's what, and there's not a lot of thought put into that side of things, and it leaves for just a very directionless sort of song. And I feel this way about many of the songs. Yes, Gene's singing is not great. I kind of gotten used to it, so I didn't write that down. And lyrically, he's trying this stuff again, which I felt this way in Revenge. And actually, I found a quote from him about what this song is about. So, quote, "Instinctively, we want to kill, and we have to fight that urge. That's what the song Hate is about."
What the fuck?
Right? And yeah, I can sort of get that from the
that
lyrics, but
urge.
he's just his. You don't.
Fuck is he talking about? You don't.
Beta male right here. But he's just not very. He's written about this stuff a few times now. This sort of like this urge that we all have, and this like evil inside us. But he's really not very good at expressing this thing, or giving any sort of insight beyond that.
You know what it is?
He uses these very cliche, vague sort of ideas about people, and I think it's very, very boring.
You know what it is? It's just the
Go on, Alexei.
it's just the self-referential. I'm evil. I'm a war machine. I'm unholy. I'm hate. Do you know what I mean? It's very, in a lot of ways.
That's what I'm saying. It's
stuff we've
all
seen
surface
before.
level. It's all vague. It never goes beyond that. And yeah, I'm sure you sound really cool singing it, Gene. But I think he does it again in this album. But I get a bit sick of it. But other than that, I think this sounds fine. A bit cringy, like the opening, like the messy guitar and the fake radio voice. I think it sounds a bit hokey. The solo sounds incredibly 90s. Like I picked up straight away, and I think that it probably is the pedal use. Yeah. So I don't hate this, but I think I'm a bit sick already of this sort of directionless sort of songwriting that they picked up from Revenge.
Yeah. Right, should we move on to track 2? Rain.
Rain down on me.
Danny, what do you think of Rain?
I wrote, God
yeah.
bless you, Paul. Just bless you. Because hearing that voice
it's
with
so
this
bad,
fucking... Man, this like Black Label ass riff behind it. It's kind of really heavy, and it's just his voice on top of that.
It's so like dainty.
It's really, yeah. And I'll talk
Does
about
not
this more in
fit.
my conclusion, but it's
Does not.
it's
fit.
really one genre too far. It's one. They couldn't do it this time. They could not do it this time. They were lucky with disco because it was disco adjacent. They really got hair metal, but this, no, they're not doing it. And
It's not working.
I just put, I'm sorry, no. Like, the riffs are fine. They've done much worse part for part, but this is really weak overall. And it's all the vocal bends.
It's
Everything
all
is
the
just... And honestly, there's a bit just before the solo where he modulates to a major key, and it's the best bit yet on the album for me, which says something about where their ballpark is. It's really long, and like I said, they've done worse songwriting wise even as well, but it really wasn't flying for me. And again, I liked it a bit more on the second listen. My second listen was on headphones, and so maybe something about the dryness of this album was a bit better on headphones for me, which is different to most of their other albums, which were much better on speakers. It's probably to do with the sort of lo-fi mix. So like I said, no, actually, that's not fair. It's not a lo-fi mix, but yeah, a bit unfinished and rough around the edges. So no, I'm afraid not at all. This is some of Paul's weakest vocal work, easily, and the song just isn't there at all. Again, part for part, some good pieces there, but no, I'm not into this. Alexei, what do you think?
Yeah, pretty it's the same. You know, yeah. Again, like you say, part for part, instrumentally, it's all right. Not too bad.
Yeah.
I think that it's got an odd time signature in there, which is very Alice in Chains. Very Alice in Chains thing to do. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, it's paint by numbers, Alice in Chains, you know, but still not hard to listen to. You know, more or less, I'm on board instrumentally. It's all right. Again, very paint by numbers, Alice in Chains, nowhere near as good, but still, I can sort of get on board with it. And then again, the vocals come in, and it's this, and the verse. This just doesn't match the way he is singing the verse. He sounds pathetic. Do you know what I mean? He doesn't sound like sort of dark or brooding, and it just sounds really kind of affected and light, and just like, you know, I think it's hard to describe. It's just dainty, and it doesn't really work. This really isn't him. This really isn't what he is good at. Like he at his best, he's theatrical. He's larger than life. You know, he can. You know, he's ferocious. Like, and this just really isn't it. The moody introspective vibe just really doesn't sit well with him, and I think the pitch of his voice in the verse as well is way too high. It doesn't work. It's hard to get a read on really the vibe that he's going for. In fairness, his vocals do sound a lot better in the bridge and the chorus and the middle eight. He's a lot nastier, and his parts are much better. It's just the way he affects this really odd voice. He's trying to do alienation and self-loathing in the verse. It comes across as very, oh, woe is me. It doesn't. doesn't pan out. Oh my god! And the fucking when he's trying to sound angry when he's like,
Rain down on me.
it's like all right, calm down, Paul. Come on, calm down. That's just you're getting a bit excited there. It just sounds really rubbish. Again though, music is much better than you'd expect, I guess, for them doing a grunge album. The issue is simply that Paul cannot inhabit this sound in a sincere way that doesn't sound completely ridiculous, and this does sound completely ridiculous. It's just like, no, Paul, what are you doing? Like, it just doesn't work. So yeah, that's my thoughts on that. But again, though, I do think the riff is good. I think the riff and the solo is good. The song is also way too long. It should finish at about the 3.5 minute mark. I think 3.5 minute mark is when it should stop. And Paul sounds very funny for the most part. Didn't work for me. Alex, what do you think?
Once again, I'm agreeing with you a lot, Alexei, about it. That there could be a good song here. Like I'm listening to the riff and the sort of different parts and the solo. I'm like, okay, like there's something here, but Paul isn't right for it. He can't quite find his place. Even though I do quite like say sort of the more mid sections, like the open your eyes, like he's sort of finding his place. Yeah, but it's still, his voice sounds so dry, and I know that's probably a mixing thing and all that. But he doesn't sound great. You said you go Alice in Chains. Like, this one struck me as very Soundgarden, and one of
the reasons why I say Alice in Chains is because Alice in Chains have a song called Rain When I Die that does the exact same thing, where he goes, I think it's gonna rain.
Oh yeah,
and it sounds much better. Obviously, it's gonna sound much better.
I don't know.
So that's why I was like,
much.
they're going for the exact same sort of vibe. Really. Sorry, carry on though. But I hear
the thing I want to say.
I hear Soundgarden as well.
Yeah. The thing I want to say for either of those bands is, one thing that sort of makes those songs is, even though they do start in this kind of like down place, they eventually get quite massive. Like that song you're saying there from Alice in Chains, and you think of songs from Soundgarden, they build to like, they tend to be quite long songs, and they build to like these big finales.
Yeah.
You know, think of something like Black Hole Sun, right?
Mm.
And I feel as though if they're going to do a song like this, Rain, it needs to go to that place. And I think, and Paul could do that, potentially, to do like a big chorus at the end. I mean, maybe. But it doesn't go there, is what I'm saying. And so we have this almost 5-minute track where it just plods along. And it's far too long. Sort of see something's there, a lot of work's been put into it, but it's not great. It's not great.
Rain down on me. Sorry.
Oh yeah, I hate the effect they put on Paul's voice at the end when they put it through.
Yeah, sounds ridiculous. Yeah. The next song, track 3, Master and Slave. Alex, talk me through what your feelings of. I was going to sing it. How does it even go? I just want to take my time. Something, crashing back. Who's the master? Who's the slave? I can't remember. How do you feel about this song? A lot of people point to this as what should have been the single instead of Jungle. Tell me what you're feeling.
Yeah, I think I saw that this was like a fan favorite of the track, or at least when I was looking at opinions online, like people referring to this track the most, being like, "Oh no, it has good tracks." We went like Alice in Chains and Soundgarden last one. This one I thought a bit more like Metallica, kind of.
I didn't hear that. Maybe Load era Metallica.
Know?
Maybe Load era. I don't think Load had come out yet though. Wait, 96. Don't know actually. Possibly. Oh no, I think it had. Yeah, it would be more like Load, Reload era Metallica.
But the Paul sounds flat and sad, and is what I wrote, and so do the drums. is
The
yeah,
snare
this
sounds
one
terrible.
I was not into it. Yeah, and I can't remember it specifically right now, but I wrote that it's very whiny melody.
Mm.
Oh, it's the which with Paul's voice, it does just sound pretty like humorous.
It's
It's not
embarrassing, I think.
giving the emotional feelings that maybe they're going for. However, I quite like the solo bass section, which is something I feel as though we don't get that much of from Kiss, so I was quite surprised at least in that sense, where it's like just a bass going on. At least I haven't heard it in a while. But the chorus, a lot of this felt like an undercooked song, a very amateur hook, a very repetitive backing riff. So this one, thumbs down.
Thumbs down.
Danny.
Oh, that's weird. I thought this was the best one yet. I didn't love it. um, but I thought, well, the first thing I wrote is the words remain unsaid. Again, the bendings, all the vocal bends. I liked that it felt a bit faster. Like the pace of the riff, seemed to have a bit more energy for me. And I thought the chorus was better. I don't remember it, but apparently I thought his vocal work was better on the chorus on this one, and I preferred the chorus. And I disagree, Alex. I thought the breakdown with the bass was so derivative, and you just tell that heard another band do that, like most of this album.
Yes.
I did like. I liked the sort of harmonized double stops that Bruce is doing at the end, but on the actual solo itself, I just thought, you know what, I like shreddy Bruce more than FX pedal Bruce, and I prefer him. I'd rather he goes crazy on a track.
Yeah, I mean, that's something I was going to say about this. It happens a lot more later, where at first I was like, oh, I'm kind of digging this kind of noisy, scratchy, effectsy Bruce sort of thing, but you start to expect it every single track, and it loses its novelty quite quickly.
Yes. To agree with Alex a bit more, though, I do think there's a big scream moment near the end, and it's...
Oh, fucking hell.
Forgive me for using the word, but it is cringe. It's a cringy, but like, because you really... It's that second-hand embarrassment you feel for him. So, I'm not going to passionately defend it. I just remember thinking, oh, this is a bit better, but not much. It's more of the same stuff, largely. What do you think, Alexei?
What do I think? I think, again, I was kind of feeling the riff. I enjoy the riff. Yeah, it reminded me of a song by Alice in Chains called Damn That River. And it reminded me of another one called We Die Young. I was sort of digging it. The snare is still rubbish, and for some reason it really sticks out in this one. I'm not really quite sure why. The snare is just so bad. And then Paul came in, and I was just like, no, Paul, what are you doing? He's going for this, like, almost kind of teasing misanthropic thing, where he's almost like a sort of like, oh, you think that? Well, you think it's going to be okay in the end? Well, it won't. You know what I mean? And it's just very, very... It's not very him. It's very, very rubbish. Again, it's just the same shit. It's the same criticisms. It's just very, very, very wrongly placed. It's not a good fit. I think the chorus is better though. I think when he's rasping it up, it does lift the track and
yeah, I agree with that.
Makes the depressing, angsty veneer a bit more convincing. At least a lot more convincing than it is in the verses. And I think just making yourself sound a bit more menacing does make it a bit better. However, again, I could just listen to like another band, like, you know, it's it's the same thing. I'm like, well, I could listen to this, or I could just listen to like, you know, a much better.
We were straight
band.
up making this point back in like Hotter Than Hell. I remember we were like, you know, there's better classic rock out there that I could go listen to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, or I could just go listen to Black Sabbath. I could go listen to like another band. The random scream that you're referring to, Danny, I didn't get cringe off it. I won't argue with that, but I did find it very, very funny. I was so taken aback by it, particularly on the first listen. Because he's doing that, like, you know, where he sort of almost lean in to listen to it, and then goes, when it starts, like, you're like, what? What? Sorry. It's like he went for it's too much on the angst.
Yeah.
He kind of went for it was a bit like when, let's say it's like a kid you're at school with that everyone knows how to get a rise out of, and they know it's easy to get a rise out of, and it's really funny
That is Paul.
to do it. That's what that scream was giving me. Leave me alone! Like that. And in many ways, it might be the best bit on the album, just because of that. Probably not though. I do think it was a good solo. Again, I did like the solo, but again, my patience for that sort of soloing is wearing a bit thin at this point. I agree, probably one of the better ones on the album, but disingenuous, and you could just go listen to something else. Ultimately, it fails. Childhood's End. The riff different with this one. The riff in this one I was not digging. It's a bad chorus. It's yeah, some shot. This is a bad chorus. It's catchy in a very bad way. Like
I was just gonna say that. It's the most catchy track on the album. It's been in my fucking head today.
In the worst way possible. It's catchy in the worst way possible. Like I remember when I was like I remember when I was younger. I was in Paris. I can't remember how old I was, but I went to the Hard Rock Cafe in Paris with my mum and my brother. And they played the song Our House by Madness. And I'd never heard it before. And I think I had it in my head for like 3 weeks straight. And it was killing me. Like, even as like a 6 or 7 year old, I remember it was depressing me, because it was every waking moment was haunted by our house in the middle. Like, it was I think there's a type of catchy song, which is why catchy isn't in a good way, where it can be so pervasive and all-consuming, almost like having schizophrenia, that it almost becomes invasive, like an intrusive thought, because you don't actually like it, but you cannot stop it from
That's Childhood's
you.
End.
Yes, that is Childhood's End. I don't like it. It's very dull. The bass line at the end is way too loud and really busy, and I zoned out a lot. This and a lot of some of Gene's kind of more, I guess, more deep. I guess you call it deep, or attempts at deep cuts. I really zoned out, found very hard to pay attention to, and just started thinking about other things, and then ultimately was left with that chorus, which I still haven't been able to sort of shake in a very, very bad way. So I'm very negative on that one. Almost tempted to put it in the bin, because that chorus is tormenting me. But you know, we can discuss that. We can table a motion to do that. Alex, buddy, what do you think of Childhood's End?
This is like the worst. This is the worst kind of song to talk about, because it's just, this song's just like one thing. It's like one note over and over again, and it's just so annoying. Like,
Really
saying about this, about the chorus, just immediately from the guitar riff, it's just had this pace that just plods along, and he's obsessed with that that melody line, and then say the whole chorus is that repeated again and again, and it does stick in your head. And I just don't understand the song. It's very ominous and strange, and I know they're going for a darker thing here. I once again have another quote from Gene about what this song is about, and I think it's funny because it contradicts the last one that I read. So I'm going to read. Like, the last one I read was all about how we instinctively want to kill and fight, while here he says, with childhood ends, it's sort of about a loss of innocence. We're all born and we don't think about killing or anything, and then once the innocence of virginity and the virginity of innocence is gone, that one's very dark, sort of like a hymn. But again, as I started listening right away, you can hear a sort of kinship to revenge. So we're not straying at all.
Of a madman. What is
Yeah, I wanted to include
I haven't got
that last
clue
bit
what that's.
because you can hear he's trying to justify this album and this song. So you go, oh well, we're not straying at all. It's very similar to Revenge.
It's nothing
It's the same sort of thing.
Nothing like Revenge.
Yeah, but you can hear there, like, even he's a bit rambling about what this song here is. This song starts nowhere and goes nowhere, despite having a chorus of kids, which should be a big thing, but it's still flat, which I think is quite an accomplishment. Danny?
Yeah, you guys have said most of it. I thought when the riff comes in right at the start, I instantly thought he just can't help but sound 80s-ish at this point. He can't quite stay up to date. It's a very dated-sounding riff at the start, I thought. I thought, what are these chords in the verse? It's all over the place in the verse. And
Completely random.
Yeah, just random chords. And then I just started writing, stop it, Gene. Just stop it. What you guys have said, it's a very annoying song. I don't think it's bin-worthy because I just think he's done so much worse than this. Musically.
Oh, I didn't consider it. Maybe we should put it in the bin.
I mean, I'm good either way. It's very, again, it's very invasive in a very, very bad way. Like, I don't like how
I think
catchy
you've
it
got the
is.
casting vote, Alex, because I'll err on not putting it in the bin. I think the bin's sacred, and I think this is just an annoying song. But I'm not against.
I go back and forth on how nice we're being, and I sometimes I feel as though we should be putting more in the bin. So it depends what the.
Anyway, you think about it.
The last thing we put in was Domino from Revenge.
Yeah, but that was
Domino's
offensive.
really bad.
I'd say we put it in the bin. I say we put it in the bin.
Okay. Put it
In the bin it goes.
I mean, it's really bad, so I'm not
It is
totally
really,
against.
really bad.
There we go. It's going in.
I thought something in the mix felt very off. It sounds more like a demo than the other songs on this album. I actually didn't mind the busier bass stuff at the end, Alexei, but it is so loud.
Way too loud.
You just can tell he really thinks he's onto something with this song. He thinks, like, he loves this song. You can tell from the way he's going about it. And the fucking kids choir and shit. It's just... No, I'm happy with it going in the bin, actually. Yeah, fuck.
A lot of his favorite songs he has written are some of his worst, actually. And I think you're right. He seems to really dig this one. I think he was really onto something. His other favorites are also Great Expectations. He likes that a lot. He also likes Domino a lot. And he also really likes Going Blind. He's also said that Going Blind is one of his favorite songs that he ever wrote. So there you go.
I'm just looking at the Kiss bin, and it's just all Gene songs.
Of course it is. Of course it is. Right, we ready to move on?
Yeah, we can move on.
Yeah.
I will be there. I will be there. Alex, what do you think of this tender ballad to Paul's newborn son, Evan? What do you think?
I wrote that I'm very glad to hear some cuts from The Elder were made it onto this this album because this.
I put that as well. I fucking put that as well.
Oh, what?
I put Elder vibes
this
on
sounds.
this.
Yeah, and I'm not just talking about the sort of. I don't know what they use. The sort of folky.
The 12
stringed instrument they use.
Guitar.
Yeah, is that what? Yeah, like
Yeah.
of course that adds a bit more of like a whimsical or folky sort of style to it. I'm not just talking about that, but sort of the sentiment, the cheese of it is very The Elder, very theatrical, and much like most of the songs of The Elder, like it doesn't work, or it's just a bit too corny, a bit too crappy film soundtrack. Funny enough, though, this has the most plays on Spotify by quite a distance. So this one is catching out some people. I'm not quite sure why. When you listen to the lyrics, it is very sweet, but for me it just doesn't fit Paul singing. Like when I think about Paul singing a song to his child, this is really not what I expect, and
well, that's why
it doesn't
that's
quite
what I
work
mean
emotionally for me as well.
That's what I mean about him shoehorning it into like a sort of style he doesn't really like. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it just doesn't fit in quite a number of ways. It doesn't really fit in the album. Even like you say, this is to fit the style, but even this song is a bit out of place. Yeah, so this just doesn't work for me, and it's a bit of a shame to get this sort of like personal Paul track, and it to be so flat and dull, really. So yeah, I'm not digging it. Danny, how about you?
Well, I was obviously confused because I was listening to the lyrics thinking, is this about his son? But then one of the lyrics is like a father to a son.
I wrote
Sounds
that.
like a similar
Doesn't make any sense.
I wrote down the same thing.
Doesn't make any sense. No, I agree with you. I wrote the same thing.
Okay.
It is like when he goes like a father to a son. I was like, yeah, well, that's
Yeah.
it's not like it. That's
Yeah.
what it is. It's
Yeah,
what it is.
so-
it's not like it.
So I assumed this wasn't about his son. So I do feel a bit more mean with my review now, if it is actually about his son, because all I wrote was, I could just say everything. Oh Jesus, this is really not good. Elder vibes on this. Pompous, self-indulgent Paul at his worst. That's what I thought about this song.
Yeah.
I really didn't like this one. I thought it was just... Yeah. Alexei, what do you think of this song?
I quite like the down-tuned 12-string guitar. It's very rich and full. And I think there's quite a cool chord progression in it. I think that the main riff is quite a cool part. Again, though, Paul comes in and it just doesn't sound right. Again, like you were saying, that line like a father to a son. I thought it was about your son. That's not. It's not. It's not like it. Is it? I quite liked it when the strings came in and they're over the kind of nylon string guitar solo. Paul belting at the end is way too loud, and if I'm honest, it doesn't feel earned. Especially because the vibe of this, I think, instrumentally is more sort of somber and introspective. It doesn't really warrant belting like that. Another thing, kind of oddity about it, it ends really abruptly as well, which doesn't really sound deliberate. It sounds quite clumsy, like there's not really any intention to it. I mean, yeah, he's obviously trying to sound fragile and vulnerable in the tone of his voice, but it just sounds quite silly. And at this point, I sort of realised that maybe this might be, I think, next to The Elder, probably his probably like his worst, at least vocal performance on a record we've had so far. But we can put that up to a debate. Right. The next track is Jungle. This was the single. Again, you know, I was sort of into it. I thought this is quite good. I like the flangey bass. It's very 90s. It's sort of too long though. The sort of bass intro goes on for fucking ages, and I was like, it doesn't really need to be this long. I dig it. I thought it was a pretty cool part. Sounds even a little kind of undertow era Tool, particularly when the guitars come in. Nowhere near as good, don't get me wrong, but it's sort of sounding like that. Adjacent. There's a bit where he goes like, "Here you go," and it's kind of sounds,
Yeah.
you know, the bit that I mean. That bit sounds funny, which isn't, you know, just, I guess, better than sounding just really shit. I generally don't think, not since Music for the Elder has Paul been so badly suited to a genre of music. Again, he's on this as well. He's trying to sound fragile and sort of vulnerable, but he just sounds silly. You know, his tone of voice sounds silly, trying to sing like that. At this point, I sort of got the formula as well, which is very grunge. It's kind of quiet, fragile vocals in the verse, and then just belt in the bridge and chorus. I mean, this is the third or fourth song he's done that on now, and it does not sound good at any point. Don't get me wrong, with this song, I think it's probably one of the best songs on the album. I do think that he sounds a lot better when he is belting, particularly the chorus. Maybe not so much the bridge. I don't think the bridge sounds great. The chorus sounds alright. Overall, though, again, much like else, it just sounds funny. You know, it's very, very insincere and silly sounding, and if you're gonna try to emulate a very emotionally dense genre of music, ultimately sounding silly is a very, very, very bad look. So it just fails. And you know, musically, again, I was sort of in. Like, the solo is pretty good, but it's the same. It's the same thing. It's the same thing again. It just sounds ridiculous. It sounds really, 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 really ridiculous. There are a lot of these songs as well. This is the point when I thought the solos were starting to sound very, very samey. I also think for this 6 minutes 50 is way too long for a single. I guess I sort of agree with the fans. I think Master and Slave probably should have been the single. The outro on this goes on for like 3 hours. Goes on for fucking ages, the outro. It just goes round and round and round. And having said that, though, I do think Bruce, you know, did create a sort of cool feedbacky sort of soundscape over the groove. I don't think it sounds necessarily that bad, but it really does not need to be that long. It's probably my favorite so far, but it's not really saying a lot. It just doesn't work. It's the same with Master and Slave. It's the same with Rain. It's the same with Hate. It just doesn't work. It is a bad fit. But I do think this is probably their best attempt. Danny, what do you think?
Straight up, I don't like that modulated bass tone at all. But that's just personal.
Say the same.
Very quickly, yeah. No. I wrote, "Oh come on, Paul," because it's the same stuff, like you said, Alexei. And the fact that in this one, in the bridge, he's trying to do those stabby vocals that he's trying to pull off. They're kind of like, there's so many vocalists who could do that better. I thought, yeah, that guy, he could do it much. It's a proper disturbed bit, that.
David Draymond.
Yeah. Well, I thought the chorus wasn't bad, but I thought "Sell It" wait a few years and give it to Alter Bridge or something. Like, just this is not your sound.
No, it's really not.
Even though this chorus is better, it's one of the first big man Paul's getting older vocal moments for me, which is fair because he's not as young as he was, and that's what happens to the voice, no matter how well you look after it. But it's true. I really thought I could hear him struggling more with the big vocal bit in the chorus. I liked Bruce's guitar stuff at the end, but it didn't really go anywhere, actually. It was way too long. Overall, I just thought it sounded like a cheap action movie trailer song, it playing in the background for an action movie. So, no, it's another no. Alex?
I agree in that the this song captures the feeling the best out of all of them. So like I think Bruce does really well with the guitar work, and the riff is solid. And with those last 2 minutes where it's them just sort of not really jamming, but just sort of like creating a mood, I think they do it quite well. But it doesn't really go anywhere, and I'm just amazed it's there because it's very un-Kiss like. You know, to have 2 minutes at the end of a song where it's not flashy, it's just very moody, and just
That's how
Paul and Gene are not showing up at any moment, not going crazy. So I was really surprised by it. I quite like that they have tried that sense. And yeah, I agree with what you guys are saying. Like the chorus is okay for this one compared to like the choruses we've had already, but Paul doesn't give it enough. And when he does try it sounds phoned in. Like the roar he does, like it's so ridiculous in the context of what he's given you so far in the song. It doesn't feel real coming from him. But I think Bruce and Eric are doing a good job here. But it's all very kind of cringe 90s. Like you said it, Danny, that bass tone at the beginning is so funny to me. But that was the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. But this one I think I'll agree. I can't remember who said probably the best song on the album. Maybe.
Yeah,
looking
I'd
ahead.
go for that.
I'm gonna say that for now.
Oh, far, yeah. Oh.
Okay.
Oh wait, I think there's another one. I think might be better than Jungle. We'll get to that a bit though.
There's one.
Yeah.
Is it in my head?
There's another one coming up.
It's not in my head. No, it's not in my head, Alex. Surprisingly.
Oh.
Not. In my
It's
head.
not in my head.
Not in my head. No. Danny, what do you think, mate?
Okay, I really started to struggle at this point on both of my listens. I could not keep attention, and I was getting really bored with this album whenever I heard it. So all I've got for this is, and I do not remember this song at all. All I wrote was, I like the guitar tone. It's so fucking wannabe, which we've said a million times, and then I just put, this is really bad. So I don't remember it, and I wasn't into it. I'm getting really bored. It's the same sound, you go round and round. I don't know, Alexei, what do you think?
I think this is the one that I think is trying the most hard to be Alice in Chains. Just with none of the sincerity. I mean, and a much worse singer, and like none of the depth. It has this really simplistic sort of toddler stomp groove, which doesn't really pair well with the sludgy sort of presentation that they're going for. It's all kind of slow. That the riff's kind of slow and doomy, but the groove behind it's kind of like bum 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 like that, and it doesn't really work. Now, I'm sort of been kinder to the other Alice in Chains rip-offs you sort of hear on this album because they are sort of admirable attempts at trying to emulate that sound, and they have some energy. This does not have that. This is really, really dull. And again, the same with Danny. I was just getting really bored and slightly frustrated. I was like, there isn't really much to say about this one. It doesn't really work. It's very try hard. It's not. It's po-faced, but very, 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 very silly. Alex, what do you think?
I wrote that this is a headache of a song. Like you were saying, Alexei, just a bam, 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 ba-da-da, dun, dun. It just that over and over again. And like I say, the mixing itself is already not great. So it just so dry to start again and again. And it barely goes anywhere beyond that. And couple that with Gene singing on this one is just such an irritating song. I say I'm nominating it for the Kiss Bin. I know it's not as memorable as like other ones to sort of put in the Kiss Bin.
Headphones. Let me just listen to it for a second.
I
literally don't remember it.
Yeah, it's so irritating, and I think this might be Gene's sort of. It's not his worst lyrics in terms of like, you know, he's sung about some pretty heinous stuff before, but this is just so cringy and try hard. I mean, did you guys look at the lyrics for this one?
No, I didn't. Could you read any out?
Oh, they're in my head. I experiment with myself, looking behind glass. Faded smiles behind dark shades. It's just, to me, it's just nest of termites glowing red in my head. They're really shit. And I also sorry as well that he changed the lyrics to this one, and the ones before were even cringier.
Really?
I'll for me anyway. Like he wrote, "I died before I was born," which is like
Jesus
if you were
Christ.
doing a like parody of like
Yeah.
you know grunge songs.
Yeah, exactly.
Or
yeah.
sort of like the president. I died before I was born is such a stupid fucking line.
Yeah,
I
that's
take the law in
ridiculous.
my own hands, in my head, in my hand, in my head. Anal retentive. I don't know how that would have sat in the song. Anal retentive. Antiseptic flowing through my veins, in my head, in my head. Yeah, I'd say I'm nominated for the Kiss Bin. What do you guys think?
I don't know.
It didn't. It was. No, I think. It.
I didn't
It wasn't
feel
really-
bin-worthy, but I didn't
Nah,
like it at all, so...
No, I didn't like it all, but I don't think it's been worthy. It hasn't stuck with me. It hasn't stuck with me. It's sort of died. Whereas Childhood's End is sort of growing on me slowly, and sort of not growing on me. Not growing on me in like a positive way, as in like, oh, it's growing on me. I mean, like growing on me, kind of the way that like
Like a cancer.
like a cancer
growing.
or like a parasitic worm or something like that.
Yeah.
Not in a good way, as in that'll eventually kill me. Whereas I think that this song has sort of died because I can't remember much about it. But I was not happy when I was listening to it. But at least I can't really remember it, so that's positive. So
Fair enough.
I'm gonna
Just putting it
veto
out there.
that. I'm gonna veto that. Next one. Wait, have we all done this? Danny, have you done this? Yes, we all have. Good.
Yeah.
The next one is It Never Goes Away. I think that's a really funny title. I'm not really quite sure why. Alex, what do you think of It Never Goes Away?
The panning is so ridiculous. Like they do lots of like panning from left ear to right ear, and I really hate it. I really I'm really not a big fan of that. This is Paul's attempt at the last track we heard from Gene. It's very
It's a sludgy one,
it's
isn't it?
so Charlie moody and sludgy, yeah, like you
Sludgy.
say, and
Life
just
is
down
pain.
tempo.
It never goes away.
Yeah, yeah, they're really trying to match each other here, and you can just hear he's not feeling it. He's not
when they
feeling
were,
it.
when they were recording, when they were cutting songs like this, did neither of them like think, God, man, we look like a pair of dickheads doing this. Like, we look like a pair of absolute knobheads
Well-
doing this. This is so fucking ridiculous.
Well,
we look like
Surely Paul did
we
a
look
little
like
bit.
absolute bellends.
Yeah.
That's not what Bruce says. That's not what Bruce said. When he's like,
I thought it was a terrible idea, but I was gonna do it anyway.
well, he seems to put nobody puts this much effort into something that they think is really bad. Nobody does that. Give me a good example of someone that would put this much effort into something that they fucking hated.
I think I give again. It's that work ethic thing. It's the balance between being when does it become just completely inauthentic, and when is it just having a good work ethic and being like, okay, well, I'm a professional musician, I'm gonna see this through.
Maybe it's both. It's probably both. It's being incredibly disingenuous and being a working musician, probably at the same time.
Still think that he's rewriting history. If this album, it's the same as Elder. If this had been big, he'd have said that he was there on it from the start, and he was like, "This is gonna be." I knew it was gonna be awesome. I knew these songs were great.
I don't know. He sort of puts across like that he would cut his vocal take like on something like this, and then come out of the vocal booth, sit in a chair with his arms folded, and go,
Yeah.
Anyway,
I don't have that
Back
much to
to
say
your
about the
thoughts,
song.
mate.
I think this one is actually overall it's one of the better tracks. However, it's very long. It's very long, and as I said, you can hear that Paul is not really giving it his all, or there's something that's not there about it. So he doesn't have that power. He doesn't grab you in the way that Paul can in big songs like this. But like I said in previous tracks, like sonically from the instrumentation, they achieve kind of what they're going for. So good job. I don't know. They managed to capture like a middling grunge sound here. Cool. I'm not sure what to say about that, but they achieved it. Alexei?
again, I just throw is it all wrong. The riffs actually I think are cool and quite sludgy. I quite dig it. Yeah. The riffs, that is. Again though, it is like the vocals are just wrong. They're just wrong. It's just not right, is it? This just isn't right. And that's all I'll leave it. This just isn't right. This is wrong. It just doesn't work. And we'll leave it there. Danny, what do you think of this?
Long, boring intro. I'm so bored. Paul's vocals are too fucking loud. So overblown. Try hard. Edgy. Nothingness. Every other line is a breakdown moment. Everything is. No. Big no from me. Next.
Man.
Seduction of the Innocent. I zoned out basically on every single listen I had of this album. I completely zoned out of this one and would sort of be thinking about other stuff, and then would have to sort of remind myself, oh shit, I need to listen to this, and then the song would sort of be over. So I really struggled to focus on this one. I enjoyed the bridge. I cannot remember it very well, but apparently I did quite like it. The chorus I do remember slightly better. I think the chorus is like a word salad on this one. There's no hook. It's just kind of ramshackled sort of phrases. Gene obviously sings it badly. I guess maybe I've become more tolerant to his vocals. I think maybe I'd be a lot harsher on it before. Fucking boring mostly, I think. for the more psychedelic parts to work, it needs to have more of a hypnotic quality. Those psychedelic bits, though, sound so fucking old and dated. It's almost like he can't help himself. It's almost like those verses, the kind of thing he was trying to do on his solo album. He's just kind of like producing it through more of kind of like an alternative lens. On this one, and don't get me wrong, there were bands, popular bands at this time that were doing that sort of thing, but it still doesn't get a pass. I zoned out a lot and just started thinking about other shit that I have going on in my life. So yeah, that's my thoughts. Alex, what do you think, mate?
This one is pretty interesting for them. In that, yeah, the mix with the percussion. Have we heard anything like that from them before? Not really. I was quite into it to start off with, like to hear some different, especially after all the songs we've gotten. But this is a real mess of a song. Like in terms of, you hear the chorus and you go, is that the chorus? Or it sounds like a bridge. And the way Gene sings, it's always leading somewhere else. And I think that's part of the reason, Alexei, like why it's so easy to zone out on, because he's always kind of like leading you somewhere that doesn't actually have, like, there's no destination. It just kind of always moves on and then around another corner and around another corner. And it there's never any like payoff. It's a very strange one. I'm having a guess on like what mood they're trying to go for here. The sort of like, yeah, trancey, sort of spaced out sort of sound. I quite like the, I'm not sure what they're using specifically, but the sort of like percussion with the psychedelic guitar stuff. I quite like it. But then for the weird chorusy part, it kind of goes straight back to the sort of very dull sort of guitar sound and chorus. And it's so short, and when it comes out, you go, oh, what? Okay, what just happened there? And then it goes back to that sort of trancey part. So as much as I kind of want to applaud the attempt to try something different, I think they completely mess it up. And Gene sounds awful, as again, we have to say. Like, yeah, but in this, like, the sort of how he's singing is just so off-putting. Yeah, I'm really struggling with this song because it is just like a mess, and I'm not sure what to gain from it and what they're going for, and it's just all over the place. So sorry for not being coherent exactly.
That's
not good.
It's not a coherent song, mate. Doesn't necessarily invite a coherent.
It's such a Gene title. The title of the song is so Gene.
Oh yeah.
I was a bit like you, Alex. I was kind of into the psychedelic thing when it started, and then the hard rock switch up I didn't like at all. I did actually like, there's like a dad rock solo in the middle of this, and I don't like saying that I liked that bit, but it's about competency that we're talking about here. You know, like they're really able to pull that off because they've done it a million times. And by the end, I was like, okay, they're just milking the psychedelic thing. It's going on too long, and it's not that good. It's boring, and I was like you, Alexei. I was just doing other things every time I listened to it. I was thinking about other things going on in my life. So let's move on.
Maybe that's the point. It is a grunge album. It's maybe meant to make you think about your own shit and not about the music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, gee.
I confess, I just put what is this question mark. Danny, what do you think?
Ken Taplin was a co-writer on this.
Who's
Ken
that?
Taplin is someone I know from looking up vocal tutorials on YouTube. He's like the main guy. He's got long hair, and he teaches like vocal techniques for singing.
Wait, the guy
I
with
thought it was interesting.
the guy with a mustache. He has long hair and a mustache, and he does like
Can't remember if he has a mustache or not.
I'll look him up.
Though he had some controversy recently, like he was lip syncing or something.
Oh no.
Anyway, not that interesting. But at first I thought maybe this is one of the better Gene ones. Like I don't like it. I was really losing critical listening ability every time I was up to this point in the album, because every song on it just goes on and on and on. It's a really pompous start, and on this towards the end, I was just thinking, nah, I was being too nice before. Actually, it's really grating as a song, and I don't like it much. So same as the other ones, really. Alex.
Yeah, really difficult to talk about.
Yeah.
A song like this, which doesn't have much going for it, on previous albums would be like 2 minutes 30, 3 minutes, something like that. And this is 5.5 minutes. And again, there's not much going on with a very weak chorus, and verse. The one thing I like about it is the sort of interesting string arrangement. I'm not quite sure what they're using, but I'm assuming this is Bruce trying to like create a very like dramatic sort of kind of like creating like an orchestra string sound, but like through guitars. I could be completely missed out, but like he tries to at the end of the song create this dramatic build up, which again I just want to praise like just the attempt of
fair enough.
Something else.
You're doing better than us,
very
Alex.
pompous.
You're paying attention.
You're paying
At this
attention.
point in the album.
I was phasing out.
Well, it's very pretentious for what is a very underwritten song. And that's all I've really got to say about it, man. I think I always wrote the drums are okay, but I don't remember anything about them. Alexei?
I think one of the big failings of this record is putting songs like this. Like we've had kind of like a run now of a few songs that really don't have much momentum behind them. They're quite a dirge to sort of get through. And I think on an album like this, I mean, don't get me wrong, like I like music like that. You know, I like a lot of this kind of sludgy sort of doom metal-y sort of stuff, but that's got a lot of power behind it and stuff like that. I'm not saying this is like sludgy or doom metal or anything really like that, but they made a mistake of making quite a long album and putting this sort of run of songs in it, because there's not really anything to a lot of these songs. For this song, I put what is this ? And then I put strings sound cheap, sound like synth strings, and then I put I mean, just again, I couldn't pay attention to this. I had no reaction to it at all. And then I just wrote at the bottom, I guess it's bad then. So I guess it is bad.
Guess so.
So, next track. In the Mirror. Alex, what do you think of In the Mirror?
Very similar to the last track. The even though I guess it's different, the drums are incredibly flat on this one. Really, like when you talked about the snare earlier, Alexei, this was the one where I feel like it just stands out so much and
It's very bad.
is really irritating. And we get a drum solo in it. It's like a very, very rare drum solo. And the song itself is flat. The guitar riff is really annoying, and Paul's singing is irritating as well. Da 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 da. It's so like you just zone out and you just want to not pay attention to it. And then I put just for sort of very typical sort of flat Paul chorus, but I can't even remember what it is now.
I can't sing it.
Yeah, and again, just a very long song for something which has very little to it. It's amazing how on this album they really went against, their way of doing things. For so many albums, we would have these sort of like underwritten songs, but they would be short and their thing was always, oh well, we've got a big chorus to sort of try you to sing along to or to hook you in.
Yeah. Where are the hooks on this
and
fucking
this is just-
album? Yeah.
There's no hooks.
Yeah.
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 Record.
Yeah. But they just got songs that go on for. They just won't have hooks, and they'll just go on forever.
Yeah.
And I just think it's quite amazing. Alexei?
Again, I sort of dug. I actually quite like the riff. I think this is probably the most classically Kiss song we've had so far. I mean, it's the most like a Kiss song you'd sort of get. Like, you know, the sort of stops with the little drum fills and stuff like that is a bit more 70s rock than it is like alternative. It's a lot more upbeat, I'd say, kind of, I guess, in spirit than the other songs are on this record. At least in the verse it is. But unlike Paul's other cuts on this record, I had a sort of opposite effect where I actually dug the verse more than I dug the chorus in this. I actually thought the verse was better than the chorus. I don't think the chorus is very good at all. Overall, though, kind of the same criticisms, though. Instrumentals are kind of all right. The vocals really, really don't work, particularly in the chorus and the bridge. And the guitar solo is cool. Moving on, for me at least. Danny, what do you think, mate?
Apparently, I liked the riff at the intro. And I thought it was a really weak ass chorus. The amount of times I've written "Come on, Paul" in my notes.
Yeah, it was a bad album.
I did. The only thing
very bad album.
Yeah, the only thing of note was there was a nice sort of Slash style wah solo that brought me out of my fucking dwam that I was in every time I heard it. And the guitar soloing throughout the last chorus, while it's a weak chorus, I thought I gotta keep giving Bruce credit for trying to carry songs like this throughout his tenure with Kiss. So thank you, Bruce. But it's not a good song, and let's move on.
Thank you, Bruce, but it's not a good song.
Thank you, Bruce. Speaking of Bruce, moving on.
Wow. I Walk Alone.
Wow.
Which is written by Bruce and sung by Bruce. I think it's really funny knowing what would happen to him that he would write a song called I Walk Alone and have it be
it's sad, man.
Have it be the last song. The last song on this album. Is very, very prophetic of him. Danny, tell me, what do you think of I Walk Alone?
Okay, so it started, and I thought, oh, here we fucking go. They're going to throw in a fucking emotional ballad at the end of this album to try and win me back.
I thought it sounded like
but then
U2
I
at
thought,
the beginning.
Yeah, well, that weird guitar thing they're doing.
Yeah,
I guess they thought it was so out there.
I thought it sounded like The Edge.
Yeah, I can see that. But then I thought, oh, cute, Bruce is singing, and I think that affected my attitude.
Same,
sort of
same.
wanted to support the underdog sense. And so initially, the next thing I wrote after I realized Bruce was singing was, I mean, it's not bad, was what I wrote. So, I like the reverse stuff he's experimenting with. That's a
bold choice.
A tried and true trick that we know works well, and especially when he starts like kind of real shredding with the reverse stuff, because that's something actually not many guitarists have experimented with too much that I'm aware of. This song does certainly get better at the end. I think that's not biased. I think it really takes a while for it to live up to its own sense of grandeur. By the end, we're just about there. And the final solo, although very short, he's finally killing it and letting loose a bit. Because I thought it was going to go all like Freebird or Wild Dogs. It was suddenly going to be this big, long solo at the end. But of course, it's Kiss. They won't let him do that.
Nah.
And also, more great drumming on this track. Really good drumming from Eric. So in a way, actually, when we were talking about best track of the album, Alexei, we were both like, oh, actually, there's one more.
Yeah,
this is the one I was thinking of. And actually,
yeah,
me
too.
This is probably the best track on the album.
I agree.
And it's not great.
It's not great.
Yeah, but I think it's like Eric Carr had a send off, and so does he. He's got this last little song at the end of an album, his last album with them, and I think it's a sweet one. And I think we've all made it clear, at least especially me and Alexei, that we're very big on Bruce as a guitarist.
Yeah.
So good job, Bruce. I'd have loved for him to have more time to explore this side. And maybe, to be fair, maybe he has in his solo work that I've not listened to, so maybe that's very unfair. But I like that he gave us this at the end of his time with Kiss. So thank you, Bruce. I don't know. Alexei, what do you think?
Thank you, Bruce.
Cheers, Bruce. Thanks, man. Again, it's very nice in a strange way to hear Bruce sort of bare his soul. And it works better on a more sort of, an album that's trying to be darker and more introspective, because Bruce is a lot less of a character than Paul and Gene. We know Paul and Gene's voices as artists and their songwriting in a broad sense, and we know and the context behind that affects how we interpret these songs, particularly as we think these are complete failures, they don't work, this is completely cynical and disingenuous. But with him, it's harder to interpret it that way because we don't actually know much about him, at least as a singer. So in the sense of like where he's coming from and that level of sincerity, it was quite hard to knock, because I was like, well, I don't know. Maybe he feels like that. I certainly... I mean, not that it's an angsty, moody song. It's not really. It's kind of more like I'm a lone ranger, hit the highway sort of thing, right? It's like a Drifters sort of song. I certainly, though, didn't come off it being like, oh, you don't fucking think that. I'm like, what are you doing? That didn't come into the equation.
No.
Because I couldn't really. I guess I couldn't. So all I kind of had to go off. Also, his vocals are mixed so fucking quietly that it's quite hard to get a read on what he's actually saying. But that didn't bother me. Vocals mixed quietly doesn't necessarily bother me. A lot like the black gaze bands I listen to do that. It's not really a problem. A lot of shoegaze does that. It's not really a problem. A lot of post rock too. So I guess you can't really knock his sincerity, which on this album is definitely a plus. This is probably my favourite. I think the chorus actually is quite Smashing Pumpkins. It's got that kind of psychedelic, shoegazy, fuzzy, big muff thing going on, which I quite like. The guitar solo over the reverse track is quite cool and interesting, and not what you'd necessarily expect them to do, or him to do. The main guitar solo, again, is a lot more shreddy, and it's good to have that on that record, and it's good to hear it from him, especially because, this is basically his swan song. Gene shows up, and unlike Bruce, is mixed way too high, and that does let it down, but I think it's cool, and we can move past it. Not bad. I'm probably being a lot kinder to it than I should do. I like Bruce. But I will say this is probably one of their best closers they have had. It feels more like a closer than a lot of the songs they've had on previous records. At least it's got the feeling of being a closer. I think it's an interesting piece, and it has some cool moments. It's not bad. It's probably one of their best on the albums. Musically, I would argue maybe some of the other songs on the album are better. Sorry, instrumentally, maybe some of the other songs on the album are better, but those songs are completely ruined by the vocals and the lyrics, where this has a much better synergy, and overall the quality is better. Thank you, Bruce, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks, Bruce.
Alex, what do you think?
You guys are right. It's a very, and we might be projecting a little bit, but it's very like sort of a likable, cool track, and I like what he's going for with it, and I kind of like the sentiment. Again, I think I'm projecting, the sort of like the underdog sort of side of things onto it. You're saying like the sort of U2 Edge style guitar. I really like that guitar sound, and it sounds very much of the time, sort of like late 90s, early 2000s. That sort of sound I associate with the time. I'm not quite sure why though. And the rest of the song is cool, but I think this is one where the mixing does hurt it. Like you say, his singing is very low, and I think for this, what he's going for, at least with the lyrics, I want it to have a bit more punch or be a bit bigger, especially as it goes on, to sort of give it that like send off, that powerful feeling. And the backwards guitar stuff is cool, but a bit all over the place. Like the sort of whooshing sound is very distracting and off-putting at moments, and I think that detracts from it. So I think it's a good attempt. It is a good ending track, but I would have liked it somewhere else in the album just to sort of break up things. You know what we said, that it's been a very monotonous album to this point. And I just feel bad for Bruce, man. Like, he gets his moment to shine, and it's at the very last track on a very long album.
Yeah.
And what it's about him making a name for himself and walking on alone, and then knowing, as we know, what happens next.
What happens to him,
yeah. It's a good attempt. But I don't think it's quite the big statement that he probably wishes it should be. And the fact that, you know, they put at the very end of the album, as we have sort of learned, that that's a kind of a statement from Paul and Gene about his place in the band. You know what I mean? We've seen it before with a few different members, which again, very sad, I think, especially considering how much Bruce worked on this album, and I think done an okay job in parts. Yeah, that's all I gotta say.
Right. Let's round it up. Overall thoughts. I think that this is their best attempt at replicating another genre instrumentally. I think the tones are right. I think that the sort of cadences are all on point. It certainly sounds like the genre they're trying to emulate. I think most of that sound of Bruce. I think he's done a pretty faithful job and did the best with the prompt he was given. This could have been, at least instrumentally, a lot worse. I think on paper, this could have been a lot worse, and I think he does save it from, well, not save it, lifts it to a certain extent. The main issue is that it's just got no soul at all. This is completely soulless, and Paul and Gene are horribly miscast, particularly Paul. Ultimately, what this album does is it takes something that's meant to be, you know, dark and brooding, and makes it just sound really, really silly and ridiculous, which is not the desired effect at all. It's a really fucking long album as well. It's really, really fucking long, and at times really exhausting, particularly that run of songs in the middle. I would say, though, it's probably not as exhausting as Hot in the Shade, because it was more diverse than Hot in the Shade was, and they were exploring more different sounds. Not every song was just this kind of mid-tempo saloon sort of rock song, and the songs were longer as well, which I think kind of helps in a way. So that makes it a bit more engaging. I think ultimately, though, if you enjoyed this, you'd probably think Alice in Chains were absolutely mind-blowing. And on that, I think it's kind of interesting that Kiss were a huge inspiration on Alice in Chains. And if I was a member of Alice in Chains, I'd find it absolutely amazing that this band that I grew up listening to and loving were trying to emulate something that I was doing. And I think that's kind of a little bit interesting. To be honest with you, it's kind of a chore to listen to this album. I think it sounds really daft and silly, and it was a bad idea. I haven't really got any idea. I haven't thought much about where it should go in the list. if I'm being completely honest. If I look at the list now, though, it's definitely bottom half. It's better than Gene's. It's better than Gene's solo album. I think it's better than Hot in the Shade. I think it's better than Music for the Elder. I think it is overall better than Rock and Roll. Better than Hotter Than Hell. I would put it between Kiss, the self-titled, and Rock and Roll Over. I'd put it between those two, I think. Because Kiss has some good... The debut is shorter. It's got some really horrendous songs on it, but it's also got some bangers like 100,000 Years, Black Diamond, and Strutter. Also, the riff in Deuce is pretty good, and the riff at the end of Let You Know is pretty good. Instrumentally, I keep hammering this point, it's not bad, this album, but you're only as strong as your weakest part, and the lyrics and the vocals are so fucking embarrassing and make it sound absolutely ludicrous and silly, this album, that it completely depreciates it. So that's my feeling. Alex, where would you pop this? What are your thoughts on it?
I totally understand why hardcore like Kiss fans really love this album. There's something about when you're a big fan of a band and they do something like kind of like really different, or you hear like a very different side that you're just sort of attracted to it, and you think, oh no, actually, like it's really cool that they managed to do that, and they did a really good job. You can sort of convince yourself. Like I saw online when researching this album, a lot of fans say. But this, I mean, you can hear it in our voices, guys. Like this album is a slog. It's directionless. There's very few highlights. There's very few things to grab a hold of and be like, yeah. In the way that usually we can find one or two. Usually. And so I think it's got to go pretty low down, and I would say a little bit lower than you. I would say either put it above Hotter Than Hell or below Hotter Than Hell. I think it's sort of like underneath Rock and Roll Over, and it's whether it's better or worse than Hotter Than Hell for me. That sort of 17th spot. And that's all I'm going to say. Yeah, I think, though, yes, they have, more money and more experience. The production is all right. And, Bruce helps a lot in all these things. But it's not an enjoyable listen. It's really not an enjoyable listen from the get-go, really.
I think
I think I'm saying lower than what you think, Alexei.
I think it doesn't help either as well when in terms of how much you actually enjoy it as a listen, that it is dealing with sort of bleaker subject matter in a sense.
Yeah, totally.
Because it's just like, oh, this is fucking because it's not deep. Don't get me wrong, but it's still it's not sad either. It's just exhausting. It's like listening to someone who's about as deep as a puddle talk about their problems to you endlessly. It's like listening to a complete narcissist who doesn't really have any problems talk about how horrible and shitty their life is without asking you how you feel. Do you know what I mean? In that way, it does make it quite more of a chore to listen to overall. Danny, what are you saying?
I can see why they didn't want to release this. As I said before, it's one trend too far in terms of desperately chasing trends. It's embarrassing, and it puts way too big a magnifying glass on them aging. I think that's one thing we might not have spoken about as much. I think that's really apparent to me on this album. They're so out of touch. And they were never on the ball as a band. They've sort of lived on the outskirts of popular culture, it seems, but had a very much a cult following and at least visually remained in the public eye. But I think this is really a step further in terms of being out of touch, looking very old. They weren't that old when they made it, but it's about how they come across. They come across very old.
They really do, yeah. Yeah, they do.
Sadly, Paul is dangerously close to Gene in quality here, and it breaks my heart to say that. He had a much longer shelf life than Gene, but I don't know if you guys agree. I really think he's close to Gene in terms of his performance, his songwriting. There's not one song here I'm like, well, he's got that. You know, he's got his 1,000,000 to 1, or he's got his even stuff like Exciter. Nothing even as close to as good as stuff like that on this album.
Oh yeah,
he was on form all the way.
There's no
through the
bangers
80s. Yeah, I think the band has really, in terms of their albums, took a big turn since Hotter Than Hell. I don't think I liked Revenge as much as you guys did. I really didn't like Hotter Than Hell.
Wait, do you mean?
And I didn't really like this album.
Do you mean Hot in the Shade?
Sorry, I mean Hot in the Shade. Sorry, not Hotter Than Hell. Hot in the Shade. Fucking similar ass titles. Yeah, sorry, Hot in the Shade. For me, you know, it is not unlistenable, but it's not for me at all. I think maybe the disco and the hair metal gave them confidence that they can just dip their toes in anything, and that they're very good at, you know, being a chameleon as a band. Maybe I think they'd convince themselves that they can pull this off. The way we rank these is subjective, so I am going to put it very low because I really wasn't into it. I'm similar to Alex. I think it's definitely I will put it between Hotter Than Hell and Elder.
Yeah, just to back up
so
that point,
even lower.
Hotter Than Hell has mainline. So I think
okay.
it
Hotter Than Hell has
definitely goes with
mainline.
Hotter Than Hell.
Yeah, that's true. Okay,
I'm even thinking
it would be
this
an
might not be the
insult
time to talk
mainline.
about it, but Hotter Than Hell should be over than Rock and Roll Over, maybe. Anyway, we'll talk about that later. I think it should be below both of those because they have Peter Criss vocals on it, which is better than anything on Carnival of Souls.
I think that you need to re-listen to the production on Hotter Than Hell and the playing on it, and
maybe I do.
Then make a judge.
But
but
just mainline alone, just mainline alone is enough to put Hotter Than Hell above this album.
Yeah, true. Also, I quite like Parasite and Watching You. Overall, as an album, though, I would say... Actually, no, you got a point. Overall, Hotter Than Hell is shorter. Quite a significant... Shorter by quite a significant amount, actually. Is it like nearly half? I think it's only half the length. Let me have a look. So, Carnival of Souls...
I think it was like half an hour, Hotter Than Hell.
Yeah, so this is basically bang on an hour, Carnival of Souls. And Hotter...
Are we sure we want to put this above The Elder?
I was thinking about that, Alex. I think so because...
Oh my god, it's nearly double the length. No, you're right. It's nearly double the length. It's nearly double the length.
Because of the stuff you guys have said about this album, and it's sort of about it being quite... You know, it is... You know, it's that thing about Bruce's efforts of, you know, writing some good riffs and it being put together... quite well in that way. I think I'd put it above Elder. The only thing that I would consider in terms of Elder is that Under the Rose is really funny, and I'm not sure that is enough actually.
Under the Rose,
so I'd put it above Elder.
Hilarious. I can go for below Hotter Than Hell. That's cool with me.
Okay.
All right, let's pop it in.
Stick it in.
Here we go. And am I right in saying there's only 3 more studio albums from the boys?
So, coming up, we've got Psycho Circus, then, indeed, we've got Sonic Boom, and then...
Sonic Boom!
Indeed, we have got Monster, and then
Monster.
that's it. That's it. We've done it. We've
Get in
definitively...
there, boys!
We've objectively, definitively ranked the quality of every single Kiss album that's been released. Right, so I suppose we should round up by singing a song off this record.
Childhood's End.
What the hell are we going to
say?
Yes,
that's good. That's a good one. Or we could just sing Smells Like Teen Spirit instead. Or Childhood's End.
Or we can sing Rain. I think he's got. Oh no, childhood end is.
You just sing what you want. I'll count to 3 and then just sing.
Yeah,
whatever
just
you
make
feel
noises
like
from
doing.
this album.
Okay, 3,
All right.
3, 2, 1.
Who is my
In my head, in my
Keep going.